one will be stretched and it won't
work right.
work right. Oh, it'll work for a little while.
Okay, it's 9 o'clock and we are live on YouTube. So let's get started. If y'all could keep it down in the back, please. Jeff, we're keep it down, please. Okay, we are in session. Present is County Judge Ed Smith, Commissioners Parton and Guerin, absent Commissioners Wright and Williams. That constitutes a quorum for this special meeting. Also present, we have the county attorney and the county clerk. So if y'all would join me for the standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. If you would join me in prayer. God, please grace this meeting of Mills County Commissioners Court with wisdom and patience as we attempt to do your will in the business of Mills County. Thank you for the rain in Jesus' name. And okay, this is a special meeting of Commissioners Court of Mills County. We have a couple of housekeeping items. First, we have the minutes of our last two meetings, the regular meeting on November 22nd and the special meeting last Wednesday, the 23rd. Y'all had a chance to review the minutes, and are there any questions, comments, or corrections?
I have no.
Commissioner Parton? Any?
No.
Okay. Is there a motion for approval?
I move we approve the two sets of minutes
Okay.
from previous meetings.
We have a motion from Commissioner Guerin for the approval of the minutes of November 22nd and 23rd. Are those the right dates? No. Yes, they are. Okay. And we had a second from Commissioner Parton. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Minutes are approved. Next item on the agenda is audience with individuals. Did anyone sign up to speak? Okay. Okay, then we'll move on. This the main reason for the meeting is an order actually on redistricting. Let me walk you through the steps in redistricting. The first thing that has to happen is initial assessment. That was done. It's referenced in the order. It's been in our agenda, I think last time it was in the special meeting, and it's here again today, showing the census results for the 2020 census, which is a Mills County census count of 4,456, and then calculating for each commissioner precinct, both the number in each precinct and the ideal number, which is 1/4 of the total county number. And the variance across all precincts is 24.6%. Since the standard maximum variance is 10%, this initial assessment is what drives our next step, which is an order to redistrict. And that's what's on the agenda today. The order itself is plagiarized from an order that the court did in 2011, I believe it was, when Allison Bass was representing the county on redistricting. Basically, the order cites the assessment, which I've just reviewed with you, and calls a meeting to consider the redistricting, one or more proposed maps. We set a public hearing that has to be advertised in the Eagle. Assuming the order is approved today, the next step is we will place an ad in English and Spanish in the Eagle this Wednesday, which the publication deadline is today, for a public hearing on redistricting maps. That public hearing would be held coincident with the regular scheduled Commissioners Court of next Monday, December 13th. Following the public hearing, the court could and will have on the agenda to consider an act on that redistricting and approve a redistricting coming out of that meeting. We're then required to give registered notice to the certified notice to the voter registrar of the county, which is our Lori King, our tax assessor collector. And that has to happen within 7 days of that meeting on the 13th. As a practical matter, it would happen that afternoon. And then she would use that order as the basis of preparing the voter registration cards, which she has to mail by January 1st. So this gets us to the deadlines. It's just a roadmap of getting the job done. What we're doing here today is not redrawing the maps, but making the initial order to redraw maps. Then after the voter registration is notified of the change, that's when the publication of the map starts, and which to me tells me that this is intended as an educational process, because it is after the hearing and after the adoption. But for 3 weeks, we publicize the new precinct maps in the Eagle and on the county website. That's 3 weeks after we enter the order to redistrict, which is entering the order for the maps to approve them. So that's the background, how it's going to work. The Highway Department has offered to print large county maps for us to work from and color on and post. We should have those this week. They'll be probably 3 feet or more square. So with that background, there's a draft order in front of us. I've shared it with the county attorney. I don't know if Mr. Hale's got any input you would like to share with us. We're all trying
I really don't. I mean, I've been around when it's done, but to be honest with you, I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to it. Sounds like you've got the time deadlines and everything priced out. It used to be a lot bigger deal than it is, a lot harder, because we used to have to run it on by the Department of Justice because of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. As y'all know, only the southern states have to do that because they're troublemakers. But that has expired, and so there aren't those requirements anymore. But we still have to follow the requirements in the code. And for there can't be minority attempts not to dilute minority votes with the redistricting. I don't see what is a big issue. That's really about it for the actual requirements. I might just say, I know just from personal experience, people really don't like to change from one precinct to another just because they kind of like where they are. So I think the least amount of reshuffling we can do is the best. So I really, other than that, I really don't have any comments. That procedure or the timeline. It sounds like it's going to be like that.
Thank you, Mr. Hale. Comments? Oh, Commissioner Williams. Good to see you.
I'm sorry to late.
Let the record reflect your presence. Is any other discussion on the order?
The only thing that was brought up is, and it'd be, the portion of Jed's precinct, one of the voting places would change districts or change precincts.
Yes, let's talk about that. But what we're doing here is ordering that redistricting occur. We're not ordering the specific redistricting.
Yeah.
So I'd like to get this order off the table and then go on and talk about what we do next.
Okay.
And with that, and since I drafted this, I would make a motion approving the order for redistricting of political boundaries following publication of the 2020 census.
That's it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for approval of the order. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Now, the next thing that needs to happen, obviously, is doing the redistricting. We will have the ad notice, I guess is a better word for it, in the paper this week, that we will have a public hearing to consider some alternate maps in our meeting next Monday. And some, it's one or more. So what we discussed in our special meeting last week, we came up with one solution that got us within tolerance. What Commissioner Parton is pointing out is correct, that each precinct has to contain a voting place. And the maps, the movements we were looking at last week would affect the voting place that was used in one of the voting places used in precinct 2 would no longer be in Commissioner Precinct 2, that being the Fellowship Baptist Church. So the alternatives are we either find another way to do that map, or we have to find another polling place.
Will you need that voting place for precinct 3?
I would have to, I haven't got to see the map yet, so I don't know what's moving where. So you're taking Fellowship and putting it in more precincts?
Fellowship would be moving, well, actually what we're doing is redoing the voting precincts, but the effect would be it was moving from Commissioner Precinct 2 to Commissioner Precinct 3.
The only time that 2 voted at Fellowship Baptist Church is when we combined precincts.
Mhm.
So on a small race, kind of like the constitutional amendment, we combined precincts and 2 voted at Fellowship Baptist Church. Normally, the voting precinct 2 votes at Center City.
What about voting precinct 4?
I'm sorry, 4, not 2,
And 2 votes, voting precinct 2 votes where?
at Fellowship.
Okay, so that's the problem. But so we have between now and next Monday to come up with another plan.
Well, you could just add, couldn't you
I
just,
would need to see this overlaid with the voting precincts. This is your commissioner precincts.
Yeah,
So commissioner precincts don't affect voting precincts.
actually, the voting precincts are within the commissioner precincts.
They are, and it affects on where the commissioner lives. But the voting precincts are set differently than this.
Well,
We have,
Yes, but technically what we are doing in redistricting is we are moving census blocks from one voting precinct to another voting precinct.
With that current map, so yeah, one Fellowship Baptist Church will not be in voting precinct 2.
Yeah,
It's
But
changed altogether.
so what I'd suggest, and you know, what we had on the agenda was approval of an order. So we've done that. This whole matter affects Commissioner Precinct 2, Commissioner Precinct 3, and the voting district. I would suggest you guys jointly, off the record, go look at this and see if we can come up with another solution to what we came up from the workshop last week.
What about Teresa's goat sale bar?
What?
Yeah.
She would.
That's just a mile down.
Okay, let's,
On the other side of the highway.
yeah, first of all, we're not on the agenda now to do the redistricting.
Okay.
We just ordered it and with maps for next Monday. So we need to get it done rather than do it in this forum. I'd suggest that the parties involved, which would be Commissioner Parton, Commissioner Guerin, and the county clerk, get together and look at the maps from what we talked about last week and see if there are other, and Jackie can help with the voter precincts, because really, I mean, the census blocks, because that's really what we're doing. That's the smallest unit where we move 0 people or 3 people or 4 people. And I share County Attorney Hale's issue that we want to do the minimal amount of people moves we can to get there within the 10% tolerance. And would we either, when we need to have some sensitivity to where we vote, or have ideas of where an alternate voting site would be, to your point. So if you guys would work on that this week, and Jackie could help with the details on the census blocks. So that's the order on, so we've prepared the order on political boundaries. You're briefed on the ad the notice that's coming up in the paper and the process it has to follow. And we've got some homework assignments. The next item on the agenda, if the court wants to pursue it, would be a workshop on the proposed revised subdivision ordinance. What is the court's pleasure? Do you want to go through this, or your brain's too fried on redistricting?
No matter me.
I've read them. I think we need to have the workshop.
Well, I mean, this is listed as a workshop today, so we can tackle it right now. We can get as far as we want to do and have another one.
We're gonna take, you wanna do one and then, because there's several sections to this.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, anything is, we had 10 people put a lot of work into this. We funded some money to get it organized into a table of contents, exhibits and stuff. Anything is probably an improvement over what we have. I know Commissioner Parton, County Attorney Hale spent a little bit of time with the committee. Jet Johnson's in the audience. He was involved in most, if not all, of the meetings. If to go with your suggestion, Article 1 is the general provisions. The definition of the terms probably doesn't need much discussion. And then the requirements and the exceptions of number 3, we could maybe tackle that if you guys would like, or we could work through the whole thing.
Has everybody had a chance to read it?
I didn't have any questions till we got to Article 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
Okay. What about you, Commissioner Gary?
We're here.
I understand, but I mean, if we start in on Article 4, are you good with do you have anything you want to talk about before that?
I've read that thing 2 or 3 times and I personally don't have much in the way of any changes to it.
Okay. Well then, Commissioner Parker, you had some, let's start with you on Article 4.
On simplified plats. That's not something that we have in the old, right?
That's correct.
I underline, no new road shall be created on a simplified plat. And I understand simplified plats are from 1 to 4 lots.
Can you give me a page number?
14.
What page is
For page 14.
14?
Well, I guess I don't understand the question. So this is, let's say, what's the one we just looked at? Rolling Oaks. So those are going to be 20-acre lots or 25-acre lots. And they're all on private road frontage. So my interpretation of this would be if somebody wants to take one of those 25-acre lots and make it into either 2, 3, or 4 lots, and it's all on that existing private road, that might be a simplified plat.
I guess the deal is we haven't dealt with what they're calling simplified plats.
Mr. Johnson, could you expand on the simplified plat discussion?
Zero, you want to discuss that part? I don't know what a simplified plat is. I don't know where Roundtree is out. Bobby, of course, was the chair of the committee, did a good job, and he checked with 10, 15 other counties that are subdivision plats and did a good job. And as you can see, it gets complicated. You know, you wouldn't think it would be so complicated, but it does get complicated, what you can legally do, what you can't do. I don't know exactly what they're talking about. I mean, if you've got tracks that join, that have access to join a public road, and their agricultural use, or the more than 10 acres, then subdivision regulations don't even apply.
That's right.
Now you can re-subdivide property, you can take an original subdivision, and most subdivisions, when depending on the size of them, but if it's a fairly large subdivision, it'll have an area off to the side that says reserved for future development. And so that'll be like a 50-acre tract over here that they're not subdividing. And so what they do when they'll come back later on, whenever they sell out the tracts on the other side, and they'll have a re-subdivision of that 50-acre tract. And that re-subdivision plans, they got to start all over with it. They got to get approval to do that too. So if that's what they're talking about, a re-subdivision of larger tracts, then that initiates the process all over. And that, maybe it's exempt and maybe it's not, depending on what they're going to do with the re-subdivision. So I'm not like,
I guess.
I'm not sure.
It says, Gerald, it says, for undeveloped or used for a single family residential development purpose into 1 or 4, up to, I guess, it should be, 1 or 4 tracts. See it. No more than 4 is a simplified plat.
Talk about family subdivision or?
It said, or a single family residential development purpose
Okay.
for creating 1 lot that goes to a maximum of 4.
Well,
And so,
in my humble opinion, I think it makes it more complicated than it needs to be. I mean, I would, if that provision can be discovered somewhere else in the subdivision regulation, my purpose would be to delete it.
Okay.
I don't know that you don't need any more in there than you have to accomplish the purpose. And if it's accomplished somewhere else, then I'd vote to take it out.
Well, I don't know.
I think you need to understand that if there's a new subdivision down the road. I mean, you might have a subdivision that divides it up into, say, 30-acre tracts. And then somebody that owns one of these 30-acre tracts may come back later on and want to subdivide. And if that happens, then it initiates the process all over. That re-subdivision is either exempt or not. And if it's not exempt, then they have to come to the commission for with the plan.
I think that's what this is referring to. Don't you see it as
Well,
that?
I don't know, that's because, I mean, like the one that they've got going out here, it's kind of like the one over here by the Giesland feedlots. What they're doing is selling the interior as a whole to one person. So they don't have to deal with us along the county road. But they're also giving that person that buys the interior, selling them a 50-foot right of way to put a road to the interior.
Well, and then, you know, a road is a road. And my opinion on that is, it doesn't matter what you call it. If they are laying out roads for access, and I don't care if it's, you want to call it a flag lot or whatever. If it's a road, it's a road, and if they're laying out those roads and haven't complied with the subdivision regulations, then they're in violation.
Would you say, I mean, are you saying that an easement is a road?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether you call it an easement or a dedicated road, it's a road.
Okay.
And again, Jim, these are just recommendations, you know, y'all have a concrete decision, of course. So this is just recommendations that we brought to you guys.
Do you recall any specific discussion at this point, Mr. Johnson,
A discussion about what, Jim?
about this simplified plat
You
issue?
know, I really don't. I wish our chair Roundtree was here. He did a great job and a lot of work. I've got it wrong to a funeral, but again, you know, it's your final decision. These are recommendations that you came up with as a whole.
And that was Bobby Roundtree's comment to me when this was delivered, is this was a compilation from lots of different sources. It's organized, but it could stand further work.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you're gonna hurt anybody's feelings.
Sure,
No.
yeah, it's not very much.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're
It's,
not
uh,
hurting anybody's feelings.
It's recommendations. The commissioner's court has a final say so as what to do. So
Okay.
anyway. I got
Thank you.
Have a good day.
But I do think we need.
But I don't think it makes any difference if it's an easement or a dedicated road, it's a road. In my opinion, if they lay out roads, then they eliminated their exemption.
Yeah.
And they're required to come to the court.
I do think we need.
I mean, I've dealt with these easements before. And I'll give you a good example of a developer who scratched his head and said, why did I do this? He had a subdivision, he laid out around the road right through the middle of it, called it an easement. And he sold off lots and gave everybody an easement access down this road. He didn't dedicate it to the county, to the public road. Well, we sold off all the lots and 3 or 4 years later, he's still getting a tax bill from the county. And he came to me and said, what is this? I've sold all my lots in that subdivision. I don't own anything up there. And he said, I said, yeah, you do. You own the road. Because you didn't dedicate to the public road and you didn't sell it to anybody. He said, well, what am I going to do about that? I don't know. It's your road. You figure it out.
So it became a toll road.
But I,
In my
Yeah.
opinion, it doesn't matter if it's an easement or a dedicated road, a road is a road. And if they laid out road and subdivision for use of the law owners, then all the exemptions are gone.
Okay. Well, remember, this is a workshop, so we're not approving or disapproving anything, but I think that the consensus comments was that the concept of simplified plats
Needs to be looked at.
needs to be either removed or discussed with the committee.
yeah, I think we need to see what they
Okay.
meant.
Okay. Good catch. What's next?
got paragraph on number 3 on page 15, but that was just the final plat
Yeah,
deal, which is kind of what we got into on the old deal. The final plat really is not the final plat. The final plat would be the final plat approval at the end.
well, yeah, I had a problem with that part too. The language that says the final plat may be approved concurrently with the preliminary plat.
Yeah.
I think we need to separate those two. But your point is have approving the final plat prior to all the improvements being done.
Completion of everything.
And what we were told by council was that if we had a bond, we could not require that. Am I stating that correctly?
Well, I don't know if you not require, but it does make sense to require. Because if you're going to require the roads to be constructed prior to plat approval, you don't need a bond.
Mhm.
The bond is to cover it so that, okay, yeah, we approve it, but you've got to build your road. If you don't, this bond
Should we
stands for it.
eliminate the bond requirement and just require the improvement be completed? Or could we do that?
Yeah, you could, but
I mean,
it's making more work on us, though.
I disagree.
Nobody's in here, but buddy, I don't know.
You don't count. Did you get that?
I was like, Billy, get this down right here.
So, between us, this whole bond issue, I mean, the bond is to indemnify the county if these roads are constructed. And that implies that the county would come in and construct these roads. And there's no obligation for the county to construct these roads. I mean, like the county would want to stay out there. You've got roads, and some roads, have roads, and we're not going to build the roads. And so the only time that you would ever try to file a claim on a bond would be if you, when I say you, know, the county comes in with their equipment and actually builds a road. And I don't think that.
No,
And it does address that somewhere in here, or a third party contractor, if they don't complete it.
but we could get all the way, we could just be out of the middle of that by saying, and it would be probably more protection to the purchasers saying the final plat does not get approved or filed until the construction, everything's done and accepted.
Or you could get completely out of it and say, we don't care to build your road.
Well, I think we come back to the public safety issues, ambulance service, fire service, police service. If there's somebody we've approved a lot back there through the plat.
I mean, city subdivisions, without a doubt, most places require streets to be constructed. Paved with gutters and drainage and the whole shebang. Before hospitals are so tall. We're out here in the country, rural, we got that situation, so. I don't know, it's up to you guys to decide.
But before, in the old,
But I don't think it just doesn't make any sense to me that you require a bond and require construction of the road. Because the two are, just don't work.
I agree. And it's hard to draw on a bond. I mean, insurance companies, their business model is to not pay. So, yeah. Look how hard we've had to just get the hail damage fixed. Can you imagine a road construction bond?
but when we tried not approving the final plat before, then they came back with litigation, said we can't do that.
That was because that old ordinance had a separate thing that required the bond. It required the bond and it didn't require the plat approval until they were completed. And that was the legal point was you can't do both. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah.
So that's a flaw in the old ordinance is what bit us there. So if we remove the requirements for a bond, we could make real explicit that the final plat approval and filing is only after the work's done and inspected.
And they won't be able to sell until they do it, right?
That's a question for the county attorney.
I didn't catch that.
Can a developer sell land prior to the plat being filed? Would you close it at your title company?
Well, it's a violation, it's misdemeanor on the subdivider part to do that. You cannot refer to a subdivision or a plat or sell off lots. If subdivision plat approval is required, you cannot do any of those things without violating federal law, and it's a misdemeanor to do it. But there's also a statute that says, but this does not affect the validity of the deed, which argues that makes any sense at all. That's what the law is. Which basically means they committed a criminal offense to sell off lots, but it doesn't affect the title of the property.
Doesn't affect the person buying the lot. They still have
The person
title.
who's buying that lot has still acquired good title to that property, and because of that, the title company is still insured. But the subdivider has violated.
So if you were writing the title policy, would that be cited at all as an exception, or would that just be, you'd still write the policy? Okay. So the answer is, I think they could still sell.
They just pay the misdemeanor fee and go home.
Mhm. If they get prosecuted. Okay, that's a good point, and I think am I fair in saying that the consensus would be to go without the bond and require measurable, the actual completion and acceptance? Okay.
Situations, what's roads completed and what's not roads completed.
Well, that's what I want to know. Are our roads right now completed or they not
Yeah.
completed?
Well,
The subdivision plat just shows, just has a width of roads. It doesn't really have specifications on it.
but the ordinance does. What's written in the draft from the advisory committee, and even in our old ordinance, talks about widths and depths of
Material.
of
the sub base and the slope to the drainage easements. All of that is defined.
Yeah, you gotta have an objective test.
Right.
that the commission court can look at to say whether these roads are completed or not. I can see the argument between the developer, whether the roads are actually complete or comply with specifications. So, I'm not.
Yeah.
saying some way right, one way wrong, but you can think about it.
What's in the 85 ordinance, and I think is in here, it's both the involved commissioner and a county designated engineer. And we've actually retained an engineer on an Indian Springs project because there's a requirement for an approval at the sub-base level. And he and Commissioner Park have been out there. He wrote a report. So you're right, there can still be finger pointing, but at least there's a third-party professional there being paid by the developer, saying that, yes, it meets specs or it doesn't.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. You need some third-party professional to be able to tell the court whether these roads have been constructed according to that.
Yes, I agree.
I always want the commission court to have go down and look at all this stuff and decide what the place, you know, correct or drainage to put in or water, and somebody did.
Yeah, we have done the subgrade. We will have to go back and do the final when they finish topping the road. There's a compaction test, but not much. The new ones have 95%. The old one had 80 on the subgrade. He looks at drainage. He was very professional, took soil samples and I guess done us a good job. Yeah. For what I know.
I don't think we have to look at something, well, we just don't like it for, well, why not?
Yeah. Well, we'll just push it off to the county attorney.
Here, let me sit up here by me.
Yeah, you'll be closer to a microphone. No, we're just delegating all the road inspections to the county attorney.
Nothing bad.
Can we back up? To the
Yes.
and ask him
Yes,
what
we
they-
may. Mr. Entry, we're discussing the simplified plat requirements, and there was some confusion over how necessary it was and what the,
It's one of the, I took out that, excuse me, you remember we talked about if the county wanted to oversize a line or be able to make a road bigger, contract with the developer to do that, and always pay the difference.
yes,
You know, I took that out.
Yeah.
You didn't think it would be used.
no,
I don't think you'll ever use a simplified plat.
Okay.
Yeah, that in there as well. And evidently it's something that the bigger counties, use if they feel necessary. But as far as y'all's ordinance is concerned, I don't think it's necessary.
okay. And just to catch you up with what we were just sort of wrapping up on, was the concept of bonds versus bonding the work being done and paid for as a condition of final plat approval versus not requiring bonds and just requiring the work be done and inspected by a third-party professional before final plat approval. And that's the way the court's inclined to go. Now, this is just a discussion. We're not making any final action today, but
So bond versus no bond.
Yeah, I think there's language for that.
yes.
You were good.
Yeah, where we got caught on our current ordinances, we had language going both ways. And it was, you can't have your cake and eat it too, problem.
I think this says if the court desires.
Yeah.
I believe it's your choice, I believe. I don't have it.
Okay,
I believe it. I think it's in the first paragraph, that's surety bond information.
okay, we'll take a look at it in that light, but our inclination was it was just easier to go off the actual work being done and accepted. There's a lot of floodplain language in here that I wanted to brief the court on. The standard language across the state points to FEMA's 100-year floodplains. That doesn't do anything here. I don't think we have a map that shows a 100-year
The other
floodplain.
counties do not participate in FEMA, like, we don't have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what we do have is 17 earthen flood control dams scattered around the county, built in the 50s and 60s.
But that's not a FEMA plan.
I understand, but what I want to substitute for the FEMA plan for now, because we don't have it, is each one of those dams has an upstream impoundment area and a downstream, it's called an inundation zone for a dam failure. And the reason this is important is when these were built, we were pure ag. Now there's structures going up. In many cases, people not even knowing they are in an upstream or downstream zone for these dams. The state has started inspecting dams. They have changed the risk rating on a dam based on having residential structures in these upstream and downstream zones. which people didn't know they were in. And it comes back and affects the county because we're responsible for approximately half the cost of the maintenance of those dams. And when it was a low risk dam, it was not a big deal. You go in and put some Roundup on it. But as they become high risk dams, because there's now a house in the downstream inundation zone, the people that built the house didn't even know it was there. It's more cost exposure to the county. And my desire would be to bring that concept into the subdivision ordinances so that the plats had to reflect the upstream and downstream inundation zones and impoundment areas, which are known and mapped in our Soil and Water Conservation Office, just not with FEMA, and have those reflected on the plat and say, okay, you cannot build residential structures in those zones, or actually the way they do it around the lake is you can't have the lowest level of your residential structure within that inundation area. And you can't have your septic system.
So that would fall under drainage, is that what you're talking about?
Well, yeah, it
I mean,
comes
it
up.
mentions it in a lot of places,
Yeah,
so-
I mean, if you're looking, for instance, page 17, this is what triggered it. Requirements to be shown on the preliminary plat. Number 1.6, 100-year floodplain boundaries. I'm proposing we leave that in there because someday we might have a FEMA floodplain.
That's the reason we let FEMA in there, because if FEMA ever moved in and map Mills County, it would all be there.
Yeah,
You know,
but
yeah, that's-
expand that to include these
And.
these upstream and downstream inundation zones for the county's flood control dams. Number one, it's logical. It affects us in the pocketbook. And I think it helps people buying property to know that dam's there, because the dam could be 2 ranches over on the other side of the highway.
Well, wasn't that, I mean, you got in the 1.5 on page 17, it says all natural drainage pathways. Isn't that the same what you're talking about?
I don't know if a dam is considered a natural drainage pathway. I mean, I would take natural pathways to be the wet and dry creeks and arroyos in the county. I think it never hurts to be too explicit. Well, I guess it does hurt sometimes, but.
Are you gonna have a map of those? How does anybody know?
Well, that's the problem. I mean, yes, there are maps. They live in the Soil and Water Conservation District, who's responsible for the management and inspection of those dams. But they don't get to the title companies. They don't get to the buyers. I mean, have you seen one, Mr. Hale? So, but if we put it in the plat requirements, when somebody's platting a subdivision, they got to go send their surveyor, their engineer, hey, go check on this, and then draw it on your plat.
Surveyor can do a total map, topological map.
Yeah,
With your references.
Show the elevation, various things in the subdivision. But as far as.
see, the problem is these things could,
I don't know how.
you don't want,
How are you gonna determine whether something is in that? flood area?
Well, how far downstream is, because I'm gonna take Horch's Dam out here. Carl Ray's that's on his place. I mean, go, 2 miles down the road, it's not gonna matter because the water's gonna be gone, but then down that creek.
I mean, it may depend on the dam, but I have seen some of the state dam inspection reports that show the downstream zone is up to 5 miles long. I mean, it may depend on the individual topography. So,
I'll give you an example that Bobby is well aware of. I know in Brown County, the FEMA, well, I don't know if it's when you were there or not, but they raised the floodplain by what, like a foot or 18 inches or something, not a whole lot. But it made a lot of difference. And I kind of go home with it. Mary Ann's mom lived early, Before they raised it, she was not in a floodplain. But after they raised it, to make her in the floodplain, she had to buy flood insurance, about $1,000 a year, that she didn't have to have before they raised the floodplain.
Or at least they subdivision on the south side of town. In fact, I live close to them. I had to have a FEMA survey before I could sell the house when I moved back to Oakland, because it was just, I mean, right across the street. But those people built there not knowing, and all of a sudden, they were in the floodplain. So, yeah, again, I would suggest if you want to reference the maps of soil conservation, just put a reference in there to that. You know, rather than trying to be too detailed, that they need to go look at those maps if they.
Well, I disagree with you. I mean, you don't say go, you gotta comply with those maps, because those maps don't have a compliance requirement. It's just what we want, what I think we should show is those zones from those maps be reflected on the plat.
Do they have the zones over there? Do they actually have the zones at the,
I don't know if they, I've seen them over there. Okay. I haven't done an audit and checked each 17 dams, but every time I get a dam inspection report, it shows the upstream and downstream zones. And the problem is, if you rely on the surveyor's surveying the plat, these things are not necessarily in the plat. And what comes up into the plat is something that he's not going to see on the ground. And by doing it, I mean, we're dealing with plats, so this will be advanced information to the buyers before they build the house.
you're talking about preliminary.
Yeah.
Mainly is going to be what we're going to be discussing here. Because if we approve the preliminary plat, then it doesn't matter on the rest.
Yeah, I didn't mean to get in that much detail. It's just a concept that comes up in my office that doesn't ever seem to come up in any other subdivision ordinance I've seen. I don't know if we're the only county in Texas that has flood control dams, or the only one that doesn't have a FEMA study.
That's why I say you couldn't reference that for the developer to make sure that, you know, put some statement in there somewhere that they need to check those maps over here.
Well, I mean, a statement on the plat that this plat does not include property that's in a inundation zone from a, I mean, but if it does, then you need to show it.
I want to go look and see what the zones look like.
Okay.
Do a little study before we. Yeah, no, I understand where you're going, but I want to see what that has entailed before we add it.
And it, besides the public health and safety issue, the bottom line is that if the state says we got to replace one of these dams because it's 50 years old and the beavers ate a hole in it, or the mesquite trees are making it leak, I'm told it's going to cost between $500,000 and $1 million. And if that happens, our share of that is more than we put in our typical budget for soil and water is $5,000 a year. So, I mean, it's a real financial risk to the county.
What, that's coming. It's just a matter of when.
Well, the less development we have in those areas below the dams, the less risk it's going to be.
I'll visit with stormwater.
Okay. I may have some of those actual inspection reports from the state in my office if you want to see what one looks like. Okay, enough of that.
I've got one on page 19 on the roads and streets.
Before we get off 18, look at 2.1.15 where it says, I'm trying to think what this, the plat must include, and it says proposed windmill easements.
Well,
And I don't know whether, I mean, we need,
that would have to be at the time of the sale. Because
though it says the plat must include. So it's at the time of the plat's drawn.
Right, and they may not know it at that time if there's, but if it's already in
Well, note it says existing or proposed. So, I'm not saying, when I read this, it jumped out at me, so.
When they say windmill, what are they?
Yeah, I mean, a windmill is something pumps water. I think what's meant
Wind turbine?
is probably wind turbines, utility lines, and given what we've seen around the state, probably should be solar projects or.
We got public utilities on 13.
Are
We got
these?
pipeline on 14.
Yeah,
So I would say that needs to be wind turbine.
Turbine.
how about wind and solar?
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
Now, with the wind turbines, there are two different things. There are easements that have to do with electric lines
Correct.
that may or may not be on the same track as the wind turbines on.
Mhm.
But the wind turbines themselves are not easements, or leases.
There are, but there are also access service roads to each turbine that may or may not be across the leased part. Well, probably is on the leased property. Yeah, because they don't have easements across properties that
Well, they have leases.
they haven't leased.
Right. All kind of places.
Mhm.
I don't have one.
So what should we have?
You got one?
Type of deal with the raising your hand on mine, authorize somebody on your property to make use of it. And, I mean, I understand that the easement aspect, for it, but I'm not sure about the lease for it. Lease has to do with the service ownership of the use of the property.
Mhm. And that would be recorded anyway.
Yes. I'm not, that's generally not something that a surveyor would know. On a subdivision plat. The surveyor would locate easements. Utility or urban or,
Mhm.
I mean, we have gas pipeline easements running through Hill County.
Yes.
Oh, that's surveyor guideline. I'm not sure what.
No, I think it'd be the easements. But what about the language existing or proposed? I mean, you can't have knowledge of a
How
proposed.
do you know what's proposed?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get. I would just say existing, but
well, that's going to affect everything, and not everything, but 3 or 4, the word proposed is in most of these things. So we'd strike.
The subdivider proposes some utility easements. Part of the plat.
Right.
Yeah. Some proposed easement, some third party, I don't know.
Like the Encore lines that they have 4 or 5 different tracks across the county, and
The surveyor will show that one, that's something, the surveyor guy. We're gonna show that plan.
okay,
I think you got lead 13 and 14,
okay.
but I think you changed the wording up on 15.
We change windmills to wind turbines, maybe solar, and take out proposed. Now, Dale, you had something on 19.
On number 2, roads and streets, subdivisions with more than 50 lots must have at least 2 entrances from the public roadway for ingress and egress by emergency responders. Because of what we've gotten into out there on Indian Springs, I think that needs to say within the same county. I mean, they ended up with not more than 50, but still they only have an inlet in each county with no egress except for back out.
Are they interconnected? Can you come in Mills County and go out in Hamilton? No.
I snuck in the other day and other night and drove it just to see. Because actually, if you ended up with a situation where I guess it'd be an emergency deal, might not could go into another county. I don't know that would ever happen.
I'm sorry, what is your question?
Just the fact that your inlet and outlet, like that one out there is in two separate counties. Your two roads, your inlet and outlet should be in the same county.
He's, as I understand it, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but he's got a subdivision out there that's in both Mills and Hamilton County. And what he's saying is technically maybe they can just put it from Hamilton County, but they can't from Mills. Is that what?
Yes, there's two separate roads. Now they're by the 85, so they don't have to have an ingress in and out, in and out. But if they do have to have an in and an out, I would think the in and the out in a split subdivision between two counties, the in and the out would need to be in the same county. You shouldn't have an inlet in one county and an outlet in another.
I don't know if I don't think it matters.
Yeah, I mean, if it's public safety,
You can't go in on that road and come out on that same road? Is that what you're saying?
no. What they'll,
Cul-de-sac, or I haven't been out there. Is it?
That's what they've got now. Your inlet and your outlet is the same road. But this is saying that they have to have at least two entrances. You know, one for going in a circle, basically, or in and out. You could go through it backwards if you wanted to. But that there would be a possibility that would cross county lines. And then you get into that deal, what we've gotten into out there. Only part of that road do we have to approve. Because where that road comes in is in Hamilton County. About 150 yards into that road, it goes into Mills County. So where their drainage and stuff is on that road, we have nothing to do with. And it just looks to me like you could get a mess where you've got two different counties trying to approve or disapprove the same road. And I guess to make it, there's supposed to be 10 horns at the bottom of that hill. They are building the road. I would think your 10 horns would be put in first. So far, there are no 10 horns in there. And we're not going to be able to touch that because where the 10 horns are supposed to be on their plat agreement is not in Mills County.
Did you make a statement, some type of statement that it should have relevant two counties, that both counties would require ingress and egress?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Well, the next one is cul-de-sacs and dead end roads. So what you're saying is right now, that's what they have is basically a cul-de-sac. Or dead end street.
yeah, every subdivision we've seen this year has been cul-de-sacs. Nobody's using through streets. I think that's a problem, but my approach would be.
Well, I know it's
to prohibit
definitely a
it.
problem from a county standpoint, but we're not maintaining the roads.
No, but to me, it's a problem for everything from emergency services to school buses. I've tried to respond to death calls and you get a little bit off on your address and you get to the cul-de-sac and they said, no, it's not here. It's the next one over. Well, you know, it may only be 500 yards on a map, but you got to go 5 miles back this way and then over here and then back in, and 10 minutes later, you're there when it should have been.
Well, I think you fix that with having a cul-de-sac. Turn the main paper around.
Yeah, it's got that. It's got the dimension on the cul-de-sac.
Is that big enough to turn around?
Yeah. And so
I'm gonna think it's 100 feet.
What, it's 80 feet?
We can make it bigger, make it whatever
Up to
it
100
takes.
foot.
Because what you gotta-
Right away is 100 foot.
Yeah, because there's gonna be mailboxes, there are gonna be cars parked there. You need to have a little bit of extra room to turn around.
I mean, it's just, I mean, that's gonna be if, I mean, I kind of agree with what Bobby just said. Maybe if it's gonna be in 2 counties, then we need to have a talk. I don't know how you put it in there. If it's gonna jump county lines, you need to have an exit in it. I mean, you need to have an ingress on both sides.
Yeah, I mean, the problem on Indian Springs is the middle part of the subdivision is in our county, but the entire entrance and exit isn't. So, and there's really not a practical way to put it in our, I guess there is, and come down that hillside across the unplatted lots.
But all that's underwater, but this, progressing forward, it could happen again. I don't think there'll be a lot of cases where you'll have these subdivisions in 2 counties. But that one, they created the nightmare over here at the tax office and everywhere else, because a lot of those lots on top of that hill, 4 acres will be in Hamilton County, 6 acres will be in Mills County.
Gerald, do you think we could prohibit, or limit our plats? Trying to think if we just limit them, they don't cross county lines. I guess our plat wouldn't cross the county line.
Yes, I don't think it's going to be a big problem. I know it's a big problem for Dale right now because he has one in both counties. There's probably not going to be a whole lot of subdivisions that have that characteristic in both counties. If somebody owns property that extends across county lines, like he said, I don't think we can say this.
Well, couldn't you just put in the beginning of this whole packet, say subdivisions must be, each subdivision must meet, cannot cross county lines or something like that?
No, I don't think so. I don't think you can do that. But there's nothing in the statute.
Says that you can't go, okay.
If I'm misfortunate enough to have 100 acres that crosses the county line, I don't think maybe on subdividing that. That goes beyond what the local government does.
It would be interesting to know how many of these, maybe not even larger places, are in split counties, along the county borders, because the county border, Mills County wasn't even there.
Yeah.
Here whenever
When
we were surveyed.
Yes.
Well, this is saying that you have to have 2 entrances,
but not in the county.
but not in the same county.
Do you think we could require under the local government code that any platted subdivision have an access, entrance in Mills County?
I think you can say that. And that's one of the things on the list, is providing adequate access.
Yeah.
And I think that's a valid reason, that's a valid requirement for good access, is to have access in Mills County. So you got fire.
Yeah.
Ambulance, might be coming from Mills County, they don't want to circle all the way around the Hamilton County and have to get in, so.
Okay,
That seems like a reasonable requirement.
then we'll,
Just add, have access in Mills County.
yeah, okay, so let's do that.
Emergency responders are available in Mills County.
Also on page 19, under the lots on 1.5, there's talk about building setback lines from the edge of the right of way. And it's got a 25-foot number. Since all the roads in Mills County all the county roads are unpaved, all the private roads are likely unpaved, and we get lots of complaints from people on dust. 25 feet, I don't think, it's fine in the city, but it's not adequate setback from an unpaved road. And what do y'all think about making that a much larger number, 250 feet, or I don't know how far back you need to be
Well, that,
not to get dust?
I'd say, I mean, to me, that's on the landowner. I would say a minimum. But I wouldn't tell them that, you know, that they have to go 100 feet back. That's
Well,
their-
it's just drawing a setback line on a plat is what we're doing, but you're saying don't bother.
I'm saying that's the landowner's choice to do
It has to be quite a way back, yes.
that.
Okay.
Because, I mean, dust wise,
I'm
you go
not
along.
arguing with it, I'm just saying.
No. It's just,
It probably had to be 200 feet. or
Well,
250
and the
feet.
problem with that too, those, judges.
okay,
Now,
I give up.
it's
Never
just
mind.
that a majority of their lots out there, and I asked them why they were like that, the majority of their lots are pie-shaped. And they've got one like this and then the opposite one wide at top. And I said, why are y'all triangling these lots? They said, well, that makes them look bigger. So if you get in that wide part of 10 acres that comes to a triangle, you have a huge piece of land. But where that would affect the guy is not the guy with the triangle next to the road, it'd be the guy with the opposite triangle.
Mhm.
But I just,
Okay. There's a reference in 2.2.2 to all-weather road surfaces at the turnaround. Would y'all consider our roads to be all-weather, or do you think this means pavement?
yeah, I think you take in each individual road.
I mean, just a point.
Oh, well,
I mean, to me,
And that goes back to what I said earlier, you need an objective standard. And
Yeah.
to say whether this complies or not. I'm not sure all weather road.
we can't require subdivision to have different roads than what the county does.
I think that was intended to say to me that an all-weather road is what you have in your county. You know, it has to be similar to what you have in your county.
so if we just say finished roadway surface and our plat requirements specify roads, and those are basically the county specs, okay.
And let me throw this in while you're on that subject. There is a particular portion of statute in the local government code that says you can't make any more stringent requirements on the subdivider than what you have on your county roads. So you can't make them do things that you don't do for yourself.
So.
Right, but we have that discussion, or I've had it with citizens that say you can't do this because you guys have a county road, goes into Jet Johnson's place or somewhere, and it's only 20 feet wide. And we have our standards apply to what we do now, not
New
what we
roads,
got
not existing roads.
handed to us. Is that right?
Yeah, that's the way I got it. Yeah. If it's been in the,
Yeah, I mean, otherwise your standard is the worst road in the county.
You consider the county all-weather road?
Some of them.
I've got some that I would say no.
It depends on whether or not you got four-wheel drive.
Hey, guys, I gotta laugh. We did a lot of this. I can assure you, this committee went around chasing lots of rabbits. There's so much in this thing.
You can chase.
So much that you can't define. And, you know, after 5 2-hour meetings or longer, this is what we come up with. So y'all are just doing what we did before. We just looked at the product.
I mean, I don't mind if it says all weather. I mean, because most of the roads are all weather.
Okay. Well, as long as
But
all
you
weather
are
doesn't
gonna
mean
get stuff.
paved, yeah.
You could add with 4-wheel drive in.
What they got in Mexico.
Well, what else? I mean, going back to the beginning, I mean, Bobby's right. We can refine this to death. It's better than what we got.
Yeah.
It's not as good as what I wrote, but it's
Oh.
that wasn't going to get done, so that's okay too.
Of course, I mean, everybody needs to understand too, that any kind of regulation like this is a fluid thing. You might decide after you adopt this, you might decide after you change something because it's not working.
Right.
And you certainly have the ability to do that. If you amend it down the road, okay?
Now, but big issue, and it came up from the committee, is administration and enforcement. And so we've got to make sure we have the ability in the county courthouse to administer it, and that the county attorney feels it's enforceable.
And I want to make sure everybody understands this, and there's been some discussion about this. You don't file criminal charges against somebody for violating the county's subdivision regulations. You file criminal charges against somebody for violating the state's and local government.
Yes.
And that is tied to the regulations. The regulations have to do with setting a standard on when and when not to approve a plat. And just because somebody violates those regulations, that's not a criminal offense. What the criminal offense is doing a subdivision without getting plat approval from the commissioner court. So you need to understand that. I mean, there's not a criminal violation for violating the regulation. The criminal violation is in subdivided property without complying with the local government code regulations for getting a plat approval.
I would like to also look at the next page, one that we spent a lot of time on. And I even discussed with
Which page, Bobby?
page 20,
Okay.
number 5,
That's what I need. That's what I have highlighted.
under the local government code, section 223 or 232, section 1009. It only allows they give you for fire is number 1 and number 2. Under number 5. What we've added about access to storage tanks and fitted with a national hose, it doesn't even address that they have to keep these tanks full. It doesn't say that you have to drill a well and keep it full. It just says you have, that you can require them to, for a subdivision, if you're 50 houses, 2,500 gallons of storage. We had a lot of discussion. 2,500 gallons is not much. 500 gallons fills a brush truck. And if it's there and you don't have to drive all the way back to town and you've got it right there, it might say somebody's, I don't know. But if they don't keep it full and there's no way in here, as far as the government code, the local government code says that we have to keep it full. And that's where the rub is. They do say you gotta have storage, but they don't make you keep it full. So items 5.11, 5.12, and 5.13, we put in under fire hazard, but we did not address how to keep the tanks full. And one of our members said, well, they're gonna have to drill some test wells anyway. Why can't they use one of those? They could, can't we require them? So that's why I wonder, and I think Mr. Hale would say to scratch this off. But is that negotiating for the county to have at least some storage? Some above ground water storage for the fire when they go out to the fire. I mean, we wrestled with this. We probably spent at least an hour or longer, all of us talking about this right here, whether we should, whether we shouldn't. And quite frankly, Wesley Peters is the guy that swung us to keep it in. Because he's a volunteer firefighter at Pretty. He said, hey guys, any opportunity we have to go hook up to water, even if it's 2,500 gallons, we won't be able to do it. So that's why I think.
But it doesn't say that you have to have it full.
Well, it says, we've written it in here. I think what we're being warned is that it goes beyond the state government code, so we cannot go prosecute somebody for not keeping the water tank full. Now, the only person
And
who's
if you say
gonna
an impoundment just catches water
Mhm.
and it could dry out. Most of our tanks right now are getting pretty dry. So
Right.
Well, we took the impoundment out because it just an apple. That's why we left the storage tanks in. They were that
Yeah.
way too, but not quicker than impoundment.
I think that,
I don't let him talk, I know what he wants.
well, I mean, 5.11 says impoundment. Access to storage tanks or impoundment. 5.11 on page 20.
I don't see that.
No, you look at the wrong version.
Is that the version that I? The one y'all gave me Monday.
They're different.
Last version.
Well, yeah, we have a different version for everybody.
I know, I promise, this is another one of those things. I told Bobby, if I'm a developer, okay, I'm gonna drill my well and build this storage tank
Tanks, man.
and get the county to approve my plat. And then once that plat is approved, I'm gonna move those storage tanks over to my next subdivision and sell that lot as a lot with a well on it. And there's all the things you can do with that.
You're right.
But there are other counties that use this and have a statement that you must keep.
Yeah. But if it'll work it may work its way into the HOA requirements. And then at least it's a tool if the property owners want to fight with the
My
developer.
comments have to do with the county.
Yeah, no, you're right.
You make a good point. Other landowners in that subdivision can certainly.
Yes.
complain about it. But there's nothing in the county. can do.
You're right.
5.1.3 says maintenance of the tank shall be responsibility of the HOA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we leave it in there recognizing the issue that the county attorneys raised. I mean, it's logical public safety. If somebody chooses to try and short circuit it, there are ways they can do that. But they're going to be building their own fight with the landowners.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Again, I think Gerald hit it on the nail on the head. If we need to come back a year from now or 5 years from now and change it, we can come back.
Well, and every time the legislature meets, the local government code changes too. So there's that.
You're exactly right. You never know what that's going to cost.
Yeah.
And I mean that with total respect.
So that jumps over to page 23 with fire protection also. So is that correct? Mine
I'm sorry. What's your question?
on page 23, number 9. I don't know if mine is in the same line as y'all.
Let
So
me find it.
And this is a subdivision that has access to public water system.
Right.
I don't know what happened on meeting.
Public water system whose water service contract says it doesn't meet fire suppression
Then
standards.
they would have to put in a water storage tank and a pressure tank that would have to provide that, according to this right here, they would have to provide the pressure. It also addresses the fire hydrant distance in the residential area.
I'm not, what are you looking for? What am I looking for
I'm
on
just wanting
23?
to make sure that we're on the same page if we're talking about
Fire protection.
fire protection. That's the next section that talks about fire protection.
Yeah, that's public water. So the one we not just approved, the one that's coming up for approval and Rolling Oaks will not have the pressure required to meet the national fire code.
Yeah, it's not gonna meet this.
No.
But it's in a different.
Yeah.
If this had been adopted, you'd have to either give them a variance
Mhm.
or you'd have to require them to build storage, like all cities do, to provide the necessary pressure. And put it in the fire.
Yeah, and I don't think they're planning on, I mean, what I recall him saying about fire hydrants was they were gonna have one at the entrance on County Road 4 something, not every 1,500 feet. I'd like the court's input on number 5, roadway and driveway culverts. 5.1 permits thermoplastic pipe. Do we want to do that, or do we want to stick with metal?
Most, and I don't know if it was out of convenience, most of the places, we still do have some on the county road. Most of the places, what I call the reinforced concrete pipe has been taken out. It's laying all over our precinct.
The downside to those plastic,
They catch on fire, they burn for a long time.
yeah, get a fire on, they'll catch on fire and burn for a couple of
So
weeks.
we don't like concrete because it breaks. We don't like plastic. And so we ought to just make it simple.
Well, the concrete on this side, most of those concrete, in my opinion, have been there 50-something years or 70-something years and they broke down. I mean, we're not talking overnight.
Okay.
I don't have a problem with the
I don't have a
concrete.
problem with
So-
it. It's lost popularity. Nobody uses
And I
it.
mean,
Okay.
and they're not around here. I mean, they're gonna have to get that to come out of somewhere else.
Okay. So
If it was me, I would take out
take out the thermoplastic.
Well,
but there's nothing wrong with it. It should, I mean, it still does its job. It's just that if it catches on fire, it burns, where the others don't.
but also with the shortage that we're going through, I've had 18 by 30s on order since September and I haven't gotten them.
But
Okay, so we leave this alone.
I think you just leave it alone.
Okay.
The only one that seems that might be a problem is requiring them to do 18 inches. If they're on flat on top of the hill, that might be hard. That next one, 4.5.2, if y'all same as mine, but you can't, I mean, you can go down as low as 12 inches.
Well, the other thing is you leave what you expect most of the time and you deal with the rest of variances.
Yeah. So 18 is a good minimum in my opinion. That's what we try to do in our precinct. That's y'all.
That's what we do. I
We
want
put them in.
him on private entrances. I won't put anything less than 15. What
Okay.
I try to do them there on top of the hill and not put anything.
Yeah, just make it a fun.
Well, we've been at this for an hour and a half. I'd rather than keep going, my suggestion would be that if there's more to come, if there's much more to discuss, we book a separate workshop. Otherwise, let's work on wrapping this up. If there are just a few hot buttons.
I do have one question on the next page, and it's gonna be a no answer. I love the statement, the Mills County Commissioners Court makes no representation or warranty, either expressed or implied, that subdivisions that comply with these water availability regulations will meet the current and our future water needs of producers of property within the subdivision. I wish there was some way we could stick that in the old subdivision.
You're gone.
I said I knew the answer was no, but there's no way that you can tell today what the future water needs are gonna be in anytime.
On page 26, are we gonna take out bond in section 1?
Yeah, is that where it was? Let's do that. Financial responsibilities and guarantees. That whole section then can come out, right?
Well, section B,
And yeah. And so, because we're not going to accept it unless it's done and inspected. So that gets down to the maintenance bond, and I don't know that. I don't recall the government code lets us have a maintenance bond. And I don't know that we care because they're not our streets anyway.
Yeah, but then if you approve it this way, then you're setting the, like you said, the HOA up so that they can have some backing to keep their streets and stuff up, but. Yeah, that's on them, us. Unless we take it over and accept it into our precinct.
I mean, that's always a risk. I mean, each commissioner's court gets to make that decision, and we could say we will or we won't, but it's going to be up to people in the future.
And historically, things like that's kind of what happens. I mean, if you have sort of local stuff out here, on the highway, more out here, probably more on the county. And all of them started out with just privately maintained roads. But as people start building houses out there, those roads start to get more traveled, and you start having mail delivery and school buses and this and that. And you get more and more people involved, and so they decide maybe it's just to be a county road. And commission coordinating things. And of course, okay, there's a lot of people out there using this road, and we get them making the county road. So I mean, that's something that is going to develop over the years, depending on the particular use of that. If you got people out here in the west part of the county that don't have any water, not much of that happens, because most people out there have a travel trailer and a couple of goats. And there's not anybody living there. And so you don't have the same use as in other parts of the county. So that's hard to anticipate how that's going to develop. I'm saying historically that tends to be the way to go. Each subdivision is different, where the county decides to actually accept something.
We have one street in Pretty Slay Street that I made the question early on. Why don't we rip this thing up and grind it and put it back in the dirt? Because it was full of potholes. Then I found out that when people started building along that street, the landowners paved it, not the county. So there is one paved street that we spend about $500 a year buying that sack stuff from to fill in pavement potholes.
We should get it repaved.
Well, wait, but if it's a county street, we can unpave it. Doesn't matter who, if they paid for it, but if it's been in public use for 7 years, isn't it then the county's pavement to do with as it chooses?
That is,
Well, the county has to accept the road as a part of the county road system. You can have a public road that's not a county road.
Okay.
Because subdivider can dedicate a strip of land as a public road, but unless the county signs off on it and says we're going to accept this as a county road, there's no obligation on the county to maintain it.
Do you know the situation on this road street, Brady, that
I give you an example of that. It's Feather Bay, Brownwood, some of that is like Brownwood. Some of you are familiar with that. There's a paved road that wanders through there called Feather Bay Boulevard. And there's a bunch of houses on this road. But it's obviously an open road. Still runs mail and everybody uses. But it's not a county road. It's maintained. They have a homeowner association. It's maintained by homeowner association. So just because the road is public doesn't mean it's a county.
there's a public road up right now at Olive. It goes into the veterans track. It's listed as a public road.
Yeah.
We got one over here.
By the county.
It's not a county road.
Yeah, I think Reggie Robbins got one out here on 16.
Yeah, that's a dedicated public road. But
It's
there's
county.
nobody's ever asked for the county to maintain it. They've got to pay for
Huh?
it. Even though it is a publicly dedicated road.
Yeah, there's landowners on both sides of the road, go down it.
Taking it over prescriptive easement, that went away in 86.
Okay.
All county roads are public roads, but not all public roads are county roads.
Stop. I get confused.
You got a definition of public road on page 10.
Yeah.
We'll try to explain that to somebody wants to public road right here.
Any road that is under the jurisdiction of and maintained by a public authority and open to public traffic.
I don't like that definition because I don't think that's that.
Okay,
I would just take out the definition.
That's why I didn't come to their meeting.
yeah. Well, before we have to buy lunch for everybody, no, I said that we're not going to get to that point. I'll try and create a red line or off this document reflecting the discussion today and recirculate it to everybody. And we can, I wouldn't say we're done, but I think this was productive. And we'll get that back in front of us and talk about what we do next. But what we need to do is take a look at our agenda. I'd like to say we've completed the workshop. Is there anything else at this stage we want to address on that?
Yeah, just send me an updated copy.
Okay,
yeah, I will.
I've got a question for Gerald. Gerald, is there any better deal than a 500-year flood? I mean, it's all through this deal is listed a 500-year flood.
Well, there's the biblical flood.
So,
It's at every 5,000 years.
well,
That goes back to Noah.
Yeah,
when
that was 5,000.
they built the bridge at Center City on Bennett Creek, all the old timers there told them it wasn't big enough. TxDOT, all their engineers said it's a 100-year flood, be a 100-year flood. It's been over 4 times in 20 years.
Okay.
Yeah, 100-year floods and drought was 1 year.
Yeah, well, it did the first year on that one.
I make a motion.
Let's, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, the entrances on the county roads.
I mean, what I heard and what I'm going to draft in a red line was that every plat has to have an entrance. Every plat approved in Mills County has to have an entrance on a Mills County road. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, but are those flats?
Now, are you talking about the road frontage?
Yes.
He's talking about the width of lots that join the public road.
Like 505 where they came in and just put.
Well,
County road.
It's back to these flag lots.
What you said, Mr. Roundtree, I think when it's hearsay because it was relating to what the county attorney allegedly said, was that we needed a separate ordinance to deal with that. Am I saying that correctly?
Standalone.
Yeah.
Well, my opinion was the ordinance needed to address the issue of culverts, installation of culverts, that you would only install whenever. But there was an issue on subdivision regulations also, which basically says that any subdivided lot that joins a public road has to be at least 125 feet in width, which solves the problem of flag lots, lots that are shaped like a flag that come out to the road 30 feet wide. And avoiding the road issue by doing that, you say that any lot that joins the public road has to be some, which would be something that would be in your
Subdivision.
regulations. The culvert issue is another issue that should be separate ordinance.
Now, that ordinance I mean, right now, as a matter of practice, the county we basically install the culvert provided by the landowner. So what you're saying is we would codify that but only to the extent that it had minimum spacing requirements. And so if the landowner didn't want a culvert, was just going to,
Some places
then
don't need it.
we can't prohibit that. We're not prohibiting that.
Right.
Okay.
But if you said subdivision had a minimum width, so they don't need a lot.
It states, lots must have a minimum road frontage of 125 feet.
That's inside subdivision. But on your county road is what I thought.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, see, that's the conundrum is if every lot has road frontage and is over 10 acres, there's no plat required. So where do we put in this? We can say, okay, every lot's got to be 125 feet. But if they don't have to plat it,
That, well, it would only apply to subdivisions that are not exempt.
okay,
And those that are, would be covered by the code.
Yeah,
okay.
that'd be a separate ordinance.
If you're not going to cover ordinance, it could be effective.
It's not going to be it's not a prohibition. It's just, they can't put a culvert.
Right, that would be the county policy.
Yeah,
Right.
it's kind of, it's kind of like what Sonia was saying. It's like what we did for the cattle guards. Cattle guards, if you're gonna put a cattle guard in, it's gotta meet this regulations. So,
Well, the county owns the right of way,
Yes,
so you can't let somebody put it in.
your own
That's
culvert.
why the county installed the culvert. You don't want anybody working on the county road that's not a county employee. Whether it's a culvert or a cattle guard, if they're gonna install a cattle guard, you know, if they back off the right of way, they do whatever they want. But throughout working the right of way, nobody can do that except the county. There's already laws that are
Okay,
But the good thing about an ordinance is it will take effect immediately.
yes,
It's like the water availability study, it took about 2 years. Had standard that you couldn't set your culvert more than 425 feet apart. And I guess at the minute, certainly then people coming in and cutting the entrance ways off of your county roads instead of 10-acre tract.
no, they'll still cut them. They just won't be a graded entrance. I mean, they'll be driving through the bar ditch.
Of course, this is just county policy.
Well,
Change or go around the policy, not against it.
is ordinance the right word? Okay,
Or resolution.
resolute,
Counties
okay,
have resolutions.
Correct.
Cities have ordinance.
okay. I'll do that. I'll draft something for your review.
But is this not what they're talking about, like these lots back here where all of them just touch the county?
Yes,
Yeah. There may be a room for entrance, but this one out here on 118, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 that just touch the county road in the corner where it stops. And there does need to be something
yeah, what this is
hampering that.
going to say is it's got to be wider than just touching.
I make a motion with
Okay, we have a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Okay.
Your buddy going.
We're adjourned.
Yeah.